everyone. I will be doing a presentation about humans and society and ethics as revealed through arts. So my questions for this presentation will be, does society work best when individuals pursue their own best interests, or is that a recipe for disaster, which is in ethics as an area of knowledge? And in what ways do the arts give us knowledge about human nature, which is in the arts? And we're going to be particularly looking at literature, though there will be some music involved. Oh, important note about format. The format this is going to be given is I used something that's very personal to me, as actually part of a play script I wrote, which deals with actually that core ethics issue. And we're going to look at how the arts reveal things about human nature and what we should do in our ethics, and how the literature supports what each person is saying in the play. I hope does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Good. Any other? These arguments will range from emotional and reasonable and be both pragmatic and idealistic. So, yes, so why should you care? It's important to care about issues of ethics, and because it's going to be things in arts and in human nature that really decide what we should do, and whether or not, and how individuals should relate to society. So this is why this presentation is going to be relevant, because you're asking questions about when you're voting and doing things like that with government, and when you're looking at what choices you want the government to make, you're going to need to be looking at what you think the government's job is, and it's going to be an individual's place in society and your belief of an individual's place in society that's going to tell you what the individual's relationship to government should be. Okay. So affirmative 1 is a pragmatic view. So affirmative is going to be basically the altruism side of the argument. Individuals should cede certain rights to the government. Putting others first is actually quite practical. In fact, almost everyone does it every day. When individuals submit themselves before the law, they're putting the common good above their own individual good. For example, it doesn't matter if I'm 2 minutes late. I is the character that you see as Zoe. Satch is her name. 2 minutes late from work. I stop at a red light. Individuals have an obligation to value the common good above their own interests, because it is on that basis that the modern civilization is able to function. Altruism is expected by and of all upstanding citizens. This is epitomized in the social contract, which is altruism does not have to be so extreme as donating all one's money to the poor. Really, altruism can be as simple as obeying the laws of the society. They continue to exist for the good of all. So she's drawing from both Rousseau and Thomas Hobbes in talking about the social contract. So the social contract is basically that individuals cede certain rights for the protection of the government. So, for example, you are protected by the law when you're talking in traffic situations, because if someone hits you, they're going to be fined, etc., and the government's going to ensure that you get justice because you're following certain rules. So Thomas Hobbes said that without social contract, there is no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, arts, society, and worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death. The life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Basically, the social contract is based on individuals ceding their rights. The first neg point as a pragmatic view the literature is going to be Atlas Shrugged, but the character Tisa, you see here, played by Katie Farr, she says, "My opponent attempts to make altruism sound simple and easy. She makes applying it as a general principle look practical, but the truth of the matter is that general principles are not always restricted to simply obeying traffic laws. In reality, societies based on altruism, like communism, don't work. The core reason that communism and political philosophies like it can't work anywhere but on paper is that the incentive of the individual man to work and fight is ripped away. It doesn't matter if my neighbor works for nothing and I work 16 hours a day. We will receive the same daily bread. All this is done in the name of altruism, and the spirit of altruism too. In order to put the common good above the good of the individual, society must enforce collectivism. I would like to close with this. If each man is productive, society will be healthier, and the individuals within a group will be better off." So she's basing her arguments on Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and things like that. The basic plot of Atlas Shrugged is that the vice president of a railroad company that is having trouble keeping her company alive, and she's fighting for this company in worsening economic conditions. And basically, she is head of the last booming economic area in the country. But then things happen. She ends up quitting, and then there's a massive accident. She comes back, And then a bunch of the industrialists in the area, important people like John Galt, are going on strike and vanishing, and the world is falling apart because these industrialists, the people who are the movers and shakers of the world, are leaving. She refuses to strike. She continues fighting for her company, but finally she joins them in this strike. And the end of the book is basically John Galt's speech about introducing the idea of objectivism as a political philosophy. So, according to Ayn Rand, collectivism means the subjugation of the individual to the group, and that throughout history no tyrant ever rose to power except on the claim of representing the common good. And that that society is healthier with each man looking after his own welfare. And another important thing that Tisa paraphrase of this is a morality that dares to tell you to find happiness in the renunciation of your happiness. To value the failure of your values is an insolent negation of morality. A doctrine that gives you, as an ideal, the role of sacrificial animals seeking slaughter on the altars of others is giving you death as your standard. So that's the basic philosophy behind this particular pragmatic view. Moving on to the affirmative number 2, an idealistic view. So we don't actually have a piece of literature for this because I noticed the majority of actual literature is very individual focused, not very focused on altruism as an ideal or political philosophies like communism glorifying it. So we have a song by John Lennon called "Imagine" to be our piece of art for this one, because music is a bit more idealistic than literature. Okay, so a quote from the play: "If everyone had a moral obligation to value the common good, no one will be lazy and take advantage of the system." All of her, being Tisa's, attacks are based on how individuals will be swallowed by the group. But if an individual is thinking about helping others, then your welfare will be cared for. The world will be a better place. There would be no depression, there would be no violence or no war. Hatred wouldn't exist. Cruelty, pain, greed, gluttony, envy, pride would go poof. Humility, respect, and responsibility would dominate the world. No mother would have to send her son off to die, or worse, to kill. War is a great evil, and really it was war that caused all the problems in Russia, wasn't it? Because Tisa is very focused on Russia and communism and things like that. It was war that drove the starving people to man revolution. It was war that drained the people dry until there was nothing left. The world would finally be at peace. We would need a break from our selfish ways, or we will destroy ourselves. So basically, she's pointing to selfishness as opposed to lack of individual motivation as the problems in the world and the cause for the problems with political philosophies like communism. A political movement that you can see this in is, of course, being a hippie. Is basically the epitome of this view. So moving on to Meg's idealistic view. Oh, Carly's face on mine. Probably won't talk to her right now. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on this one because I find it the most interesting, as opposed to it's necessarily the most important of all things. So Tisa says, "We hit the heart of the debate, humanity. I ask our judges, what makes a human being? Is it our flesh? Is it our blood? Is it our DNA? No, DNA isn't special. We share 40% of our DNA with bananas and 98% with chimpanzees. No, humans are more. Don't you feel it? Can't you sense it? You're not just oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen. You're much more than the sum of your parts. It's your spirit that makes you human, and the human spirit is something wild, something that roves, that seeks, that boldly goes. Where would we be without our fight? Where would we be without our drive? We would find ourselves in a nightmare where our free will is at stake, and our free will is what makes us human. It is our ability to make a choice, good or evil, that ultimately distinguishes the human being from a machine or an animal. Without evil, as Satch claims selfishness is, as a valid option, the choice to be good would be empty. We cannot be morally obligated to the common good, because once that obligation is placed upon us, we are robbed of our free will. Without our free will, our altruistic actions are meaningless. But no, good doesn't exist. But no, we keep pressing on. We keep fighting, which keeps us on our toes. Without the pain, life wouldn't have the fullness it has now. Her perfect world is painfully empty." So, the piece of literature that I love very much, I use the movie cover because it's more interesting, but the piece of literature that I used for this would be Clockwork Orange. So, a lot of people know about Clockwork Orange because of its violence and its very crude sexual stuff. However, Clockwork Orange actually does have a very interesting message. So Anthony Burgess, the author, was inspired to write A Clockwork Orange after a visit to Leningrad in 1961, where he met some Russian teenage thugs. Some important things to note about Anthony Burgess when you're thinking about his writing: he believes that communism was a fundamentally flawed system because communism takes the moral responsibility away from the individual and gives it to the state. So this a more moral version of Ayn Rand's argument that the subjugation of the individual to the state and or to the collection is going to be a problem. So he was fundamentally Burgess was influenced by Catholicism, which exerted a huge influence on his moral views. For example, his beliefs about original sin. Even though Burgess himself wasn't Catholic, he left the church as a young man. Its teachings really did embed itself in his heart. And he talked, and his views on violence in society were very influenced by the church. Burgess's ideas that free will and an original sin stopped him from accepting a system that sacrificed the good of the individual for the public good, because it's going to be the individual that needs to make choices. We have free will given by God, etc. So A Clockwork Orange is more than just a critique of the Soviet Union or communism. American and British society contribute to this dystopia too. Burgess thought that the British welfare state sacrificed individual liberty for social stability too readily, and he also despised the American pop culture because he believed that it inspired apathy as opposed to inspiring action. He also thought that American law enforcement was corrupt and violent. All of this, though, merely sets the stage for Burgess's main satire, which is of behaviorism. So behaviorism, pronunciation today is not happening, but it's within psychology and basically the belief, championed by B.F. Skinner, that human beings are fundamentally subjected to their genes, basically nature over nurture, in the nature-nurture argument about human nature. So Burgess was very much against it, and behaviorism was the main satire of this novel, which is shown in the Ludwigio technique, which basically reforms Alex. The character Alex does a lot of bad things, and he's sent to jail. After many years in jail, he doesn't really change all that much, and he's slated to go to this special technique. They give him this technique, and they basically condition him against violence so that he's physically unable to bear violence. They make him meek, and they make him very harmless to society. But the philosophical point is that once he's unable to actually make the choice to do evil, the good things he does are empty, which is Thesis' argument. Some closing remarks would basically be, arts really show us what humans believe in human nature, and all this argument and shows us how humans go about creating their ethical arguments. Whether it's with political philosophy or with psychology or just their ideals. Thank you. Yay! Oh, that's the end.
Wow, you talk about